Hey there, hope you're doing good. We'll continue with our series on refactoring Futurecam. Let's take a look at this task. Make mode a protocol, fix yo-yo problem. I think I have a video about this. Anti-patterns and code smells.
Let me introduce myself. I used to work at Google. I ran my start.
This is the yo-yo problem. I'll put a link to this video. Pause this video, watch the other video, understand what the yo-yo problem is, and then come back. Basically, the short version is that we have this class mode with multiple subclasses, some of whom have subclasses of their own. And understanding this flow is very hard because the control keeps bouncing from one to the other. So originally, the code structure was like this. You had a camera class that would do all the capture. As Futurecam gained multiple modes like time-lapse, long exposure, light trail, burst, video, photo, etc., this class became unwieldy. It had too much functionality. So then I refactored it this way. We had a mode class and a subclass for each mode. And the mode specific functionality the camera class would delegate to the mode, whereas common functionality would still be in camera. This was a fine design, but this was a class, not a protocol or an interface in Java. So it gained a lot of functionality. So there were functionality across all three layers, camera, mode, and the concrete mode class. So in this refactoring, we'll explore making this a protocol and see if that improves things. One advantage of a protocol over a class is it doesn't prescribe an implementation, it just gives you an interface. Whenever you invoke a function on a class, you have to think, what does this do? You have to look into the implementation because effectively you're invoking an implementation, you're not invoking an interface. A protocol sets up like a firewall, so you don't think about that anymore, you just think about the interface. So let's try refactoring this. I'll delete all the stuff here once the refactoring is done. Can a protocol have static? Yes, it can. Let me just check. Let's close these windows to improve performance. Again, as I mentioned in the earlier video, the right way to do this is on a Mac with the compiler, because when you refactor, you should run unit tests, automated tests, preconditions, post conditions, invariants, assertions, all of these automated testing tools, and also run the app manually on the phone and check that it works. I no longer have a Mac, I'm using a Windows machine, so we'll just get by with not compiling. Protocol mode. This should work, we'll just test it out. this is the wrong syntax. You're supposed to just give the interface here, then have an extension on the mode. Static. Actually, you can even get rid of the thing above. This should static member. Unhelpful messages. Okay, basically you can't have a static. Yeah. I think this is what you need to do. It will be odd code class light trail mode, which conforms to mode, and it doesn't have any. This works. You can see before the dot you need a class name, not a protocol name. This is kind of misleading because the purpose of default mode is to return which mode to use. If you call it this way, it will look like you have already decided to use light trail mode, which defeats the point of this. So I think we should make it a global thing. We can introduce a namespace like mode helper. Like we could do this class mode helper and then put yeah, it doesn't. It just adds more cognitive load because now you have to think about the node helper. Instead, I'll probably make this global. For now, we'll just do that. All right. Anyway, the name says mode, so you probably don't need mode.available. Okay, cool. So now we have taken care of that. We have a protocol mode. When defining a protocol in Swift, you have to mention either get, which means read only, or get set, which means it's writable. In this case, it's read only. This is what will show in the UI. For example, in the iPhone camera app, you have these modes, right? It says photo, portrait, etc. Video. That is what user description returns. The description. Let me just close it out. Yeah, sorry for that. This is a runtime failure. This is bad design. the compiler. So if you define a base class, a subclass of mode, you can't make this abstract like you can in Java to force the subclass to implement it. Swift doesn't have that feature. So it will be a runtime failure. We don't want user description done. Is locked is straightforward, but documentation is a good idea. So every mode gives you 10 free photos, and when you have exceeded that, it gets locked. We don't have a photo mode anymore. Your first mode. The documentation needs to be updated. This no longer has an implementation. If you want to implement a function with a default implementation in the protocol, this is how you can do it. Nowadays, Java also allows you to have default implementations in interfaces. As part of this process, I'm improving this documentation. So this one, camera changed. Let's look at it. So you can see that the camera classes camera changed calls mode.camera changed, which again goes back to the camera. So you've started at the camera, then you've gone to the mode, then you've ended back at the camera. This is bad structuring of code. You don't want to bounce. Let's make sure that the changes we have made won't cause any problems. These are class vars, that's okay. These didn't have any implementation. These two have been made global. The dummy implementations which generate a runtime failure have been removed. Similarly for shutter button pressed, shutter button released, the default implementation works. So far so good. I don't see anything we have done that would cause problem. So when you refactor, you should periodically pause and make sure that you haven't made anything worse. Just as doctors believe in the principle of first do no harm, like forget about helping the patient, first don't make anything worse. Similarly, we need to make sure that we are not introducing any more problems. This should be here. So now we are saying that all modes must implement shutter button pressed, because obviously they need to start recording. Shutter button released is optional. Now let's look at camera changed. Yeah, let's see who all is in. We do know that, oh, see the comment? The cap informs the camera that the user changed the capture type. The capture type also changes automatically as you switch modes or make other changes, but those don't result in a call to this function. So you can see already that it could be more clearly named. Not camera changed, but camera changed by user. So that is one point. Yeah, this is the UI code where the user is toggling the cameras and wide, etc. That's the one that invokes camera changed. Oh, reset camera. So when the mode changes, we call reset camera, which calls camera changed. So already you can see that either this code is wrong, because in this case the user did not change the camera, so this callback shouldn't be invoked, or the documentation is wrong. It's not camera changed by user, it's camera changed. However, it happens even automatically. That is something we need to resolve. And yet another forwarding function. Who invokes it here? So in the long recording mode, in the long exposure mode, after you stop recording, you change the camera back to the default. Again, this is automatic. In the burst mode, to begin with, you change the camera. Again, this code doesn't match the name of the function. The name sounds like the camera is already changed. and the callback is merely informational, whereas this looks like it is changing it. Okay, this is something we need to resolve. The code you can see is repetitive. Checks which camera is on and uses a prompt. Ah, now I understand. When it says camera changed, it means the camera has been changed at a logical level. Now it needs to take effect. So you have a delegate called camera delegate, which has all these callbacks. These wide on, tele on, not callbacks, accessors. These ultra wide for each of the cameras. And camera changed means that these have changed their values. So now the actual change that is reflected in the UI needs to be done at the hardware level. So when you change camera, there are two things, right? One is the UI updates indicating that a different camera is active. Second, the camera should actually be made active. So that is what camera change means, I guess. See, this is what happens when you look at code after 2 years. You see a lot of flaws that you wouldn't have seen when you're in the thick of things. So this should be removed. This makes sense. When the mode is changed, you're resetting. This call makes sense because the user has toggled it. These are just forwarding. Oh, this is implemented in the subclass long extension. So one thing we need to figure out is, do the mode subclasses need to handle this, or can it be done centrally? Basically, you're checking all these cases: wide, tele, ultra wide. Let's see each of them to see if the functionality is the same before we dedupe it. Wide, tele, ultra wide. Let's look at time lapse mode. Again, you're checking in the order. Here, you're also supporting print. But again, if you're in a mode that doesn't support front, the user should not be allowed to turn it on at the UI layer. Either the UI control should be hidden or disabled, grayed out. So we can still dedupe this. Here, what's happening? Yeah, so one thing you can see is that the mode subclasses don't need to worry about camera changed. So let's try to refactor this step by step. In fact, what we should do is, Yeah, let this change be done later on. I should use a different Git branch if I want to do it quote unquote properly, but I'm lazy. I'll just put a copy on the desktop. Now we can revert all the unnecessary changes here. We made these two global. This message was changed. And we added, let me just copy paste these two. Okay. Discard change. Okay, great. Now that that is taken care of, let's make one focus change. So often when you refactor code, you go in a direction. Then you identify a small problem. And then you put the original exploration on hold and say, let me fix this small problem. And then come back. So here the small problem we are going to fix is the subclasses don't need to have this code. This can be in the base class. We can keep this. We just need to add friend. Where is the, oh, interesting. There's a default implementation here for classes that don't override. Who is it for? Is anyone using it at all? Because if all of the subclasses are overriding this, then this is no longer needed. Abstract multi-frame mode doesn't, multi-frame photo mode. We should make some of these classes short. We'll do that. This doesn't override it, but it's child class. Long exposure mode does override it. Non-real-time video mode doesn't override it, but its subclass time-lapse mode and light trail video mode both override it. Then there's burst mode. So it looks like all of them override it. So let's go ahead and make the change. You can always edit that code. So it looks like this code is dead code. It is never executed because everyone has overwritten it. Okay. What it's called is friend on. This force unwrap causes it to crash if it is nil. So we should take care of that. Anyway, coming back here, let's look at not needed. No, for sure. Not needed. Light trail mode, not needed. Burst, not needed. This doesn't do anything. I'm a little annoyed by this forwarding function. You have one on main controller, which invokes camera, which invokes mode, and yeah, it's like too many forwarding functions. Oh no. This is the desktop version. We just close it. I was thinking, why are there two more? Some blank lines help improve readability. Separating this if else ladder from the code before and the code after. Okay, let's go back to the diffs. If you make only one focus change in a commit, the chance of screwing it up is much less. If you do too many things, you will invariably, hello, mess it up. If you make too many changes at once, we'll invariably mess it up. So let's just make this change. Indent the same camera changed implementation among. Oh, he has an idea. Mode subclasses. Okay, let's look. The first step is to verify that the default implementation that was there, which set it to wide, was not actually used, because burst mode had an implementation, light trail video mode had an implementation, long exposure did, and time lapse did. So everyone was overriding. So deleting this line is a safe change. Then you're checking if it is wide, you set to wide. If it's tele, set to tele. If it is ultra wide, set to ultra wide. If it is front, set to front. See, these kind of error messages. I wish I could edit here. I always love editable dips. This is in mode. It's not light trail video. Okay. First of all, can we make this a let, because it's not reassigned? And secondly, after, so suppose you do reach this code path, after that you're dereferencing nil and crashing. That's not what you want. I don't even know if the server logging will happen. Maybe there's some delay, and before that happens, the app crashes. I don't know. So let's take care of this. So I guess in this case, we can just set it to wide. Swift calls it unhard. This can be let because it is never reassigned. In each of these cases, at this point it is unassigned. After that, and these are if else. So exactly one of them will execute. No, the question is if you're going to dereference it anyway, you might as well make it non-optional, because optional implies you're going to handle the case. AV capture device. Now we just have to check what the data type is. Extensions. Where did that go? Yeah, this should work. I mean, if the compiler gives an error, we can always put an exclamation. So the order of the if else doesn't matter except here. I don't know what this comment says, but it seems to imply the order matters. I've used this order: wide, tele, ultra wide. Wide, tele, ultra. Okay, great. Oh, one important thing we can do in the mode class is final. Is the right syntax? Swift final func. Yes. So now you are preventing this problem from being reintroduced. So now what have we done? We have moved camera change from here, 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 and light rail mode here to here. Now let's look at what else we can do. Let's redo the search. So since the implementation is the same for all the modes, it doesn't need to be in the mode hierarchy. It can be in camera itself here, and the forwarding can happen in the other direction. So currently the forwarding happened like this: main controller invoked camera, invoked mode, which again invokes camera. If you see here, finally it invokes the camera class. So at the end of the day, the work is being done in the camera class, nowhere else. So then why don't we put the implementation itself there? So what I'm proposing is the actual set device call. So what I'm proposing is this way. Main controller still invokes camera, but mode invokes camera this way. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 in the chain, I have 3. So let's make the change and then evaluate as always. This reset zoom parameter, I don't think it's needed. It's always set to true. That is another thing. Maybe we can get that sorted. Here it is true. Here also it is true, which is bad design because if you accidentally change it here, now the default changes depending on where you are calling it. That is one problem. Second problem is the call site never specifies it. You're never calling it this way. Oh, and the implementation also seems to ignore it. Reset zoom is not okay, it is used here. So do this first step. Step do this. Let's look at the diffs. Are these the only call sites? This doesn't change. This doesn't change. Okay, great. Okay, that's done. Now let's go back to the change we were talking about. Is it called delegate or camera delegate? Called delegate here. You don't need camera here. If you think of the purpose of this, it was just to dedupe, or not dedupe actually, just to house code that is different between modes. And if some code is not different between modes, it shouldn't be in the mode hierarchy. Now let's change the direction as per this. Instead of main controller invoking camera, invoking mode, which goes back to camera, we move the code here and the direction changes. Camera has the actual implementation. The delegate is the same, so that's not going to cause a problem. and you remove the set, you remove the camera dot set device because now you are in the camera class. And here the forwarding forwards to camera. Here it used to forward to mode. Okay, great. Let's commit this. Reduce one step in the sequence of calls for camera instead of do this. These mini diagrams are very helpful for people to understand. The next question is, do you even need this forwarding function here? I don't see how this adds value. In the modes, can you directly call camera? So you can see how you start refactoring at one place, which is to make mode into a protocol, and then you go in other directions, you find low hanging fruit. Always grab those first. Controls controller invokes main controller, which invokes camera, as to abstract multi-frame photo mode, burst mode, mode. So non-real-time video mode covers light trail and time lapse. Then there's burst. Then there is long exposure, which is covered by abstract multi-frame photo mode. My God, quite a mouthful. Let's look at the diffs. These forwarding functions really make it hard because now you have a series of functions where nobody does any work. Everyone asks somebody else to do the work. That's bad code. Okay. Remove useless, unnecessary forwarding function mode.cameraChanged. You can see how design evolves. It's organic. It's not like a house where you start with a floor plan and don't deviate. You're not going to add another bedroom after building the house. Okay, cool. One more thing we can look at on the topic of naming. We have these classes called video burst saver and video burst record. We don't need to differentiate them that way because earlier we had two ways of capturing a burst. You can capture it by internally processing a video and then extracting frames to create a burst, or by capturing multiple photos directly. That has been removed long back. So now you just have one burst, one type of burst. So let's see what we can do. Video burst. The Xcode project needs to be fixed, which would happen if we are using Xcode. We are not, so that's okay. This won't compile, but if we do want to make it compile, we can fix it later on. Save. See, these are the references in the project. don't even know what this talks about. At least let's update. Commented code shouldn't be submitted. Add code. Don't know what it is, but the app works fine without it. So let's just when you make a mindless change like this, wherever I see video burst, anything, I just remove the word video. It becomes easier. We have to make sure the casing is correct. Okay, so now there are no references to video burst except in the Xcode branch, which obviously we're not going to. Edit menu. Oh, it still shows here. Oh, the class itself isn't renamed. I forgot the most obvious. Burst recorder, file name, comment. Comment doesn't add any value. Why do we need a comment telling us what the name of the file is? Okay, burst recorder. When doing refactoring, I always grab the low hanging fruit first. We are far from where we started refactoring the mode, but that's okay. Intricate design problems require you to chisel away at them over and over again. Take a bunch of small steps. Don't try to attack it head on at one go. Oops, this is lowercase. 81 of burst mode. The type is also lowercase on 89. The variable name can't be same as the type name. Okay, this is good. Okay, great. Let's quickly scan other file names to see if any of them are redundant. This is a nice small name, animator. It controls an animation. Don't use big names. Apple uses child. They have something called accommodate presented item deletion with completion handler. Are you going to describe everything that's going to happen in the world with the function name? Why not add, in background thread when battery power is available to the function name? Right? This don't help with readability. Anyway, coming back, these are all extensions. Burst mode, right? So this non-real-time video mode is an abstract class, as is this class. So the inheritance hierarchy is like this: mode, non-real-time video mode, this my drawing. Non-real-time video mode has two subclasses, which is light trail video mode and time-lapse mode. Abstract multi-frame photo mode, which has one subclass. I should have drawn this diagram before explaining. It would have been easier for you to understand. And then it has one direct subclass, burst mode. So now the thing is, these two classes are abstract. But why does this have the word abstract in the name and not this? Be consistent. And all the more so in Swift, since the language doesn't have the concept of an abstract class like Java does, you can accidentally instantiate this class. So it's important to call it abstract something. And do we need to be, where is it? Non-real-time video. And I think you can just say abstract video mode. The fact that it does not record in real time is a detail, because we don't have a video mode that does record in real time. So the clarification is not. And again, the comment gives the wrong file. We don't have an art mode anymore. So comments are often written from an implementation point of view, because when you're in the thick of things and you're asked to explain something, you don't do a good job. You jump into details without giving the big picture. This happens often when you talk to engineers who are really deep into something. They'll tell you things which you don't understand. So you should start with a simple, dumbed down, if you will, explanation. A mode that records a video of some kind. And then you have all the details. Okay, abstract video. Yeah, we are not going to test the iPhone 7 anymore. Now we need to check for call it the same thing everywhere. Don't call it a light rail formation video. It's a light rail, it's a light. Oh, I think this needs to be fixed. Global current. What on earth is global current? I think it's a mode dot type. I got this right. Let me check it. If this is a dumb comment. Of course, it will capture a light trail. So in the name, what else will it capture? It will capture a time lapse. We have a time lapse. Yeah, is dot type. So here, I think we missed this in an earlier refactor. Okay. Okay, what else can we do? Oh, I forgot to rename the line. In Xcode, this doesn't happen because when you rename the class, it automatically renames. Is there an option to automatically push when committing? Okay, never mind. Long exposure mode, time lapse mode, light trail video. This the word video is important here because even though you don't have a light trail photo mode, when you say light trails, typically you expect photos, and every other app has only light trail photos. Image search, you get only photo. It's important to clarify. Okay, I think the file names are good here. Let's go back to refactoring the mode. What else can we do? Initialization. Again, this seems to be the same for all of them. Okay, we can see what to do with it. This is helpful as a forwarding. So can we make any more of these final is what I was thinking. One thing we could do is all this observer business can go into camera because it's the same for all of them. The mode class is, sorry, the camera class is huge already. Probably the second biggest. I don't want to make it bigger, but I guess can't be helped. For now, we eventually do plan to refactor this class, split it into two or better remove it. But for now, let's not worry about it. Let's put things where they belong without worrying about whether that's right or wrong. Now that this is going to be moved into camera, the camera class never gets deinitialized. Don't need to do this. See, this is optional as it's only available in long recording modes. This is a fat interface. Yeah. So basically you have an interface which is the union of the functionality of all the subclasses. That's not good. What are we doing with regard to all this observer nonsense? You are registering these two observers. Oh, so the other one you are deregistering it depending on the type. So if the capture type is video, the the will, so there are two things, right? Will enter and will design active. Will enter is being removed. By the way, after removing, you should set it to nil. And This one is being, will resign is being created. Conversely, in the else case, you're removing will resign and you're creating will enter background. Oh shit, there's another problem. It is did enter background, not will enter. So the name is, do we also have will enter? Oh, this is foreground, not for background. So first step, we'll make a small change. We'll call it did enter back. This is an iOS notification. So like it's not up to us to decide what to call it. iOS has already decided to call it. So we should be consistent. When will resign active is it matches will resign active. Oh, for now we shouldn't do this. Like not in this refactor. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's commit this. Should stop recording and make another video. Oh, 12 hours. Sorry for the distraction. Not really into video editing yet, so trying to keep things simple and dumb. There's something about limits here. Permission. Feature eligibility. Yes. Okay, never mind. So this is taken care of. Then the other thing we should do is we should set it to nil once we remove the observer because it no longer has any. This is like the non-type safe way of writing it. Copy paste to supply. The idiomatic Swift way is to write something like if let the problem with this, so the advantage is the Swift the Swift compiler is not very smart. I think I should stop making this video. It's good. So actually this force unwrap shouldn't be needed because you've already checked that it is nil. But the compiler is kind of dumb and all statically typed languages kind of, yeah, they uh, basically operate with blunt tools. So idiomatic Swift code is to write. What this does is it creates a local variable with the same name, which is non-optional. The problem is when you assign here, you're assigning to a local variable, which you can't because it's a let. But even if you made it var, you are changing the local variable, not the instance variable. So that confusion is not worth it. Better to write it. If Swift purists will frown. Similarly, oh, GitHub, sorry. Okay, what are we doing? In the did enter background observer, doing it. Then you are setting it to nil. You shouldn't carry on, like carry old state along. Similarly, you have will design actor. Because if someone does access it by mistake, then all right. So anyway, we made a bunch of changes here. We are nailing out observers that are no longer needed. We renamed something to reflect its use. We simplified some names here. This one. We removed a forwarding function. We removed one step in the sequence of calls. We removed a parameter that's always true. We have deduped an implementation among subclasses. So it's a good amount of work in this video. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. We'll continue with this refactoring in a subsequent video. And if you'd like me to work with your team helping you improve your code, my consulting link is in the description. Thank you.